Well, good morning, everybody. Here's some of the highlights of the forecast we got over the next couple of weeks and beyond, both for North and South America. I'm going to start you off with the view I had last night of the sunset in Memphis, Tennessee. So I was on top of the Bass Pro Shop pyramid down there, and I wanted to show you just how low parts of the Mississippi River are. As of this morning, the river is down to, let's take a look at it here, almost 6.5 feet below low stage, and it continues to show signs, at least in the forecast, of not recovering much more water in the near term. Our root zone soil moisture map right now looks pretty low across much of the Mississippi Basin, and while we've made some major improvements in other parts of the country, this continues to be an area that I'll watch very carefully as we go forward. Some of the last 7 days worth of rainfall, though, did hit those really dry areas, but remember, the soil steals this first before the river gets it. So we've looked into this area and saw decent rains that moved out of Texas and Oklahoma that spread all the way through the Midwest and then parts of New England. And then look at the very heavy rains along the Gulf Coast. These are desperately needed. This week, a lot of our attention is going to go to the Pacific Northwest as they continue to get hit pretty hard with some strong onshore flow. There's a deep low that's off the coast, but there's going to be a bit of a change overall in the pattern in the West because the last couple of systems that rolled through, they really brought a lot of snow, up to 30 plus inches of snow here already in parts of the Cascades and a lot of heavy snow throughout the Rockies. But the more mild air that's coming in now is going to give us more of a flood threat in parts of the Pacific Northwest. So this morning's all hazards weather map, we're dealing with, again, a lot of flooding here in parts of the Pacific Northwest, strong winds in the plains, a few areas of some fog, and winter storm warnings in parts of New England. It looks like this when we look at the winds today. We're expecting these gusts to be 40, 50 miles an hour coming out of the plains, higher at those spots where the elevation really influences the winds. And that frontal boundary that's going to hit the northwest, it'll be up to 60 to 70 mile an hour winds just off the coast. It looks something like this in the high-res models. Let's play this pretty quickly here. Throughout the day on Monday, getting to midday, and toward this evening, we do have a little system clipping through parts of the Midwest and bringing some light snow. Our heaviest snows in parts of New England through this afternoon and this evening. But the Pacific Northwest takes the brunt of the flow coming off the Pacific through this whole time period. We focus it right here in coastal Oregon and Washington. The clipper that moves through parts of Illinois eventually makes it over to Pennsylvania and starts to spread some light snow in this area, but it's not too much to really talk about. What a lot of us in the country are going to be waiting for will happen, I think, by the end of this week, when the system coming into the Northwest starts to eject into a pair of lows that come out into the central part of the United States. Most of the models are taking that and bringing a northern system here, and then late this week developing another low that comes right out and starts to draw on the Gulf moisture, really hitting this whole region. We're going to talk about the snow in a moment, but a lot of decent rainfall. Now remember, before all of this, the Northwest takes the brunt of it. Another 4 to 6 inches of rain are possible in coastal Washington and Oregon. So this is the forecast from the European model. This is what the GFS looks like, but the only difference is the GFS moves the system farther to the east quicker. That's that second system late this week. There is going to be some snow out of this, and right now the models are trying to battle over where that snow is going to be. European models dropping some snow in through here after pulling in that first system with a little bit coming out of the prairie, and then some decent snow is still left in the Cascades and Rockies, although snow elevation levels are much higher in the Cascades. But the GFS tosses it much farther to the east over Indiana, Ohio, getting into Michigan and this part of Ontario. It's got the same alignment on the snow right now in New England, what's coming through parts of the Canadian Prairie and the West, although it's a little bit bigger on the snows in the Pacific Northwest. But it's really different in the position of that low sneaking through late this week. We're going to be covering that one all week. Probability maps. How about this to add a little bit of context? Here's the best chance by the next 10 days of getting 3 inches. Now we know the snowfall amounts are higher here, New England, and in the mountains, but I'm just looking at that second system rolling through the midsection of the country. If we flip this over to looking at the wet and dry side of things, how about drier side first? 10 days, who's going to be on the drier side? Big section of the prairie, plains, parts of the Midwest and the Southwest. We just don't have the flow in these areas just yet to really bring that up. The wetter side of it, primarily farther to the east, and then again, we're going to have parts of the Pacific Northwest easily grabbing 4 to 6 more inches of total precip. Our problem going forward is that the flow keeps coming out of the northwest here, and I would love it if it would just come screaming out of the southwest. If it came out of the southwest, we would start curing U.S. drought problems in a hurry, and instead we're getting a whole lot of this. And the reminder is this is convergent flow for this area. It's milder, more mild air in the west, no good strong flow in the west, and it all gathers in New England. But overall, you look at a week 2 forecast, you see drier and drier with all the activity pretty far to the south. That's your week 2 precipitation outlook. Temperature-wise, take a look at what's going to happen middle of this week. From Tuesday into Wednesday and Thursday, the heat that's pouring into the midsection of the country as this big ridge opens into this area, going to send temperatures, 30 degrees above average. While we got some colder conditions down here across the south late this week. In fact, we do have frost again getting into northern Florida. Also late this week, watch Central Valley of California for the risk of another frost too. But there's no real link to real Arctic air through the next 15 days. As I play this sliding window of 5-day average temperature anomalies, even though it's cooler across the south, we do not see that really strong linkage to the very cold air that can sometimes happen. You say, when does it come? It's going to come when there's a big ridge in Greenland and at the same time a big ridge in Alaska. We don't have either of those things right now. So bigger picture, moving longer range, this is the newest update from the CPC. This is their 1-month outlook for the month of December. They just released this late last week. I honestly don't really buy too much into the being so much wetter than average in the Northwest from this point going forward. I do buy into this though. And my reasoning for that is I think we're going to get into a time period where this El Nino actually starts to influence the pattern. We've already started to see it in some of the movement of the MJO returning back out to the, this section of the Pacific Ocean. We've seen stronger westerly wind bursts being forecast in this area as well. And those start to point toward a pattern that maybe at times, like we see here in the 3rd week of December, is drier in the Northwest and drier in the Ohio Valley. That's typical of El Nino. And now you see it out here in the CFSV2 at the end of this month, here and here. Now that's telling you that the longer range models have bit into El Nino. But I don't know if that's necessarily going to be the kind of whole truth about this pattern. Because if you look out at the 30 days that end on January 7th, the GFS goes wetter for the West. It goes wetter for the Midwest. It goes wetter south. That's the new long-range GFS outlook. And it's not as though the European's that far behind. While it doesn't necessarily agree here in the West, it's trying to bring something in these other 2 regions, which we'll be talking about a lot in our in-depth reports this week. To finish this up, though, quickly here, I want to give you the latest update on South America. We have the same problem we talked about last week. You look out over the next 2 weeks, we see drier conditions. Most of the northern Brazil growing areas showing up stronger in the GFS than it does in the European. The European next week, week 2, is trying to bring a lot of moisture into some areas that have been just extremely dry. It's done that all season long, tried to deliver more moisture, the GFS being drier. So this model battle continues. About the only thing they agree on is the continued flooding down here, Paraguay, southern Brazil, parts of Uruguay, and better rains for Argentina overall. Big picture international weather, to give you my last slide today. Panama Canal's still dry. We've had big snows in the Alps going over into parts of Russia as well. More adverse weather coming to Europe. Starting to get wetter in pockets of southern Australia. And we noticed that this section of South Africa finally picking up some decent rain, which they desperately need. So that's what I got for you in this short forecast. We'll talk again tomorrow. Thanks.